a deadly searchlight beam from a Japanese destroyer cut through the night, a harbinger of imminent doom. Narrowly missing the side of the American torpedo boat, it froze the hearts of 23 sailors clinging to the deck of PT-164. In complete silence, with engines muffled, the boat drifted silently near WWII Island. Meanwhile, in the holds of 3 Japanese transports following the destroyer, nearly 8,000 enemy soldiers were unaware that their journey to Kolombangara, where they were meant to reinforce the garrison, would soon end in the depths of the Solomon Sea. The date was July 19, 1943, and in just 4 minutes, the American sailors were to unleash the full power of their weapons from the darkness. Hands gripped the twin 50 caliber machine gun mounts so tightly that knuckles were numb from the strain. Nearby, Ensign Robert Dutch Vandenberg quietly relayed target coordinates to the captain, Lieutenant Commander Arthur M. McPherson. The faint greenish glow of the compass was the only light the sailors dared to rely on. Behind them, hidden in the shadows cast by WWII's volcanic peaks, PT-168 and PT-171 lay in wait, anticipating the signal to attack. These torpedo boats were America's secret weapon, and the Japanese fleet was about to discover why darkness was no longer their ally. A veteran quietly recalls his contribution to history, humbly noting that he was among the pioneers who proved the ability of small wooden vessels to send steel behemoths of warships to the bottom. He is often asked what it was like to be part of one of the most closely guarded naval secrets of 1943. However, he says that in those tense moments, the crew was too focused on survival to ponder the historical significance of their actions. The sailors understood only one thing: failure of the operation meant that 8,000 Japanese soldiers would reach Kolombangara, where they would inevitably engage American forces striving to capture a strategically vital airfield. Each torpedo on board represented potentially hundreds of American lives saved. Every sunken enemy transport offered hope that families back home would not receive tragic news from the War Department. To understand how 3 small boats, dwarfed by many private yachts, dared to challenge the Imperial Japanese Navy at the peak of its power, one must comprehend the difficulties American sailors faced in the summer of 1943. The Japanese fleet had achieved peak mastery in night combat. After their impressive victory off Savo Island the previous August, when the Japanese sank 4 Allied cruisers without suffering any losses, they firmly established their dominance in night operations in the Solomon Islands area. Japanese sailors, who had honed their skills in night battles for years, learned to fight effectively, relying not on radar but on keen eyesight and impeccable coordination. They ironically called their nightly troop supply runs the Tokyo Express, while the Americans dubbed them the Rat Run. Regardless, under the cover of darkness, the Japanese moved troops and essential supplies almost unhindered. The American fleet, with its larger ships, advanced radar systems, and significant firepower, nonetheless suffered defeats in night engagements. American admirals, trained in traditional line-of-battle tactics like Jutland and Manila Bay, couldn't quickly adapt to the new conditions of warfare. US cruisers and destroyers, designed for large-scale open ocean operations, became easy prey in the narrow waters of the Solomon Islands. It became clear that something fundamentally new was needed, something the Japanese were not prepared for. and that something was already being built in secret shipyards stretching from New Orleans to New York, poised to forever change the face of naval warfare. The patrol torpedo boat, or PT boat, emerged as a product of American ingenuity, born in a time of desperate necessity. These vessels, reaching 80 feet 24 meters in length and 20 feet 6 meters in width, were constructed not of steel but of laminated mahogany plywood. Equipped with 3 Packard 5112 engines, modified versions of the Liberty aircraft engine, they achieved speeds exceeding 45 knots, outperforming any torpedo or standard warship. On board were 4 21-inch torpedo tubes with Mark 13 torpedoes, a 20mm Oerlikon automatic cannon, 4 heavy machine guns, and an impressive ammunition supply sufficient to unleash a veritable firestorm for approximately 15 minutes of continuous combat. After that, the crew could only hope for a safe return to base or prepare for an inevitable plunge into the sea. The author first saw a PT boat in February 1943 at the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron Training Center in Melville, Rhode Island. As a destroyer sailor just back from convoy duty in the harsh waters of the North Atlantic, he learned of a call for volunteers for dangerous assignments on experimental vessels. The recruiter did not disclose the specific type of vessels, only mentioning that the expected casualty rate exceeded 50%. Out of 200 volunteers, only 40 were selected. The author passed the selection thanks to his star navigation skills and experience operating small boats acquired during his childhood on the Chesapeake Bay. Boarding PT-164, he felt a sense close to bewilderment, deciding the Navy had simply gone mad. The vessel bore little resemblance to a warship, seeming more like an overambitious, glorified speedboat. Its wooden hull felt anachronistic in an era of steel and armor. Living quarters were so cramped that a hot bunking system was not just common practice but a vital necessity. Any semblance of armor protection was absent, save for a few metal plates covering the bridge. A single well-placed hit from a shell larger than a rifle bullet would inevitably splinter the boat and its crew, leaving them helplessly floating on the surface. However, meeting McPherson changed everything. Mac, a 28-year-old veteran by PT boat crew standards, was a true patriarch. His gaze bore the imprints of tragedies and triumphs experienced. He had faced the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor from the deck of the destroyer USS Shaw, endured the hell of the Battle of Midway, and voluntarily joined PT boat crews, driven by an insatiable desire for change. I was tired of being the target. It was time to become the hunter myself. Mac quickly grasped the essence of PT boat tactics, realizing they were not ordinary warships, but rather sea guerrillas, ruthless killers delivering lightning-fast strikes from ambush and vanishing into the night before the enemy could react. The boat's crew was a unique blend of vibrant personalities and specialized experts who would likely not have coexisted on a standard naval vessel. Dutch Vandenberg, the executive officer, a Yale mathematics professor in civilian life, demonstrated phenomenal abilities in battle, calculating torpedo trajectories mentally, outperforming even complex computing machines. Chief motor machinist's mate, Carlos Charlie Mendoza, a Los Angeles auto racing genius before the war, could make the temperamental Packard engines purr softly or roar fiercely, depending on the task. Radio man second class, William Sparks Patterson, who came from the submarine fleet, was a master at maintaining radio communication under the strictest silence. Torpedo man and gunner's mate, first class Patrick Paddy O'Brien, was a true virtuoso in handling Mark 13 torpedoes. Each of these mechanical fish weighed about a ton and cost a fortune. Paddy treated them with reverence and care, like living beings, spending hours tuning and polishing them. "These beauties," he would say, lovingly wiping their bronze propellers, "are the only reason the Japanese will take us seriously. One shot, one hit, or we're just expensive target practice." The team of a dozen brave sailors included 2 gunners, an indispensable engineer, a cook who doubled as a medic, and 3 versatile utility seamen ready for anything. This diverse crew comprised both African Americans and whites, city dwellers and rural folk, those who had dropped out of school and those with higher education. But one thing united them all: the voluntary decision to join the armed forces, knowing that their chances of survival in this war were slim. Training at Melville was a harsh ordeal, forging will and body. The Navy, having learned from the bitter experience of early PT boat losses, understood that enthusiasm alone was not enough. They needed to surpass their enemy in speed, intellect, and ferocity. Crews honed swift attacks to automatic precision, learning to launch torpedoes flawlessly while racing across waves at a dizzying 40 knots. They learned to navigate blindly, relying on sound and intuition when tropical downpours reduced visibility to nothing. Most importantly, they were taught to think not like disciplined sailors, but like audacious pirates. Commander James Wild Jim Patterson, who led the training program, had passed through the hell of the Philippine campaign and escaped Corregidor on one of the last PT boats. His training philosophy was simple and ruthless. The Japanese expect a fair fight. Deceive them. They expect you to observe naval traditions. Break them. They expect you to fear the dark. Make them fear it. He instilled in his trainees that their main weapons were not torpedoes, but surprise, speed, and boundless audacity. Their arrival at the forward base in Renova on June 30, 1943, coincided with the start of the new Georgia invasion. This location, barely deserving the name base, consisted of a modest fuel depot, a few Quonset huts skillfully camouflaged into the environment, and a primitive dock carefully hidden under dense palm fronds. Immediately noticeable was a specific smell, a mix of decaying tropical vegetation, pungent diesel fuel, and the sickeningly sweet aroma of decomposition. An additional welcome was the sound of artillery fire drifting from New Georgia, where American Marines were engaged in fierce fighting to capture the strategically important Munda airfield. The 9th Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron, comprising 12 fast PT boats, was given a critical mission to disrupt Japanese efforts to reinforce their positions in the Central Solomon Islands. The mission seemed simple: patrol the seas, ghost between key Japanese bases, and sink any vessel flying the Rising Sun flag. However, reality proved far harsher. The patrol area was a complex labyrinth of treacherous coral reefs, volcanic islands, and carefully camouflaged Japanese strongholds. The enemy had at its disposal seaplanes conducting continuous reconnaissance, observation posts stationed on every significant island, and destroyer squadrons specifically trained to hunt down and destroy small, agile PT boats. Their first combat patrol on July 5th turned into a genuine tragedy. 3 torpedo boats, including theirs, were tasked with intercepting a Japanese convoy near Visu. However, a cunning enemy seaplane detected their presence before they could take up an advantageous attack position. Unexpectedly, as if from nowhere, 4 enemy destroyers cut them off, blinding them with searchlights and unleashing a barrage of fire from their guns. In a panic, like frightened rabbits, the boat scattered, weaving through a hail of exploding shells. PT-158 was unlucky. A direct hit from a 5-inch shell tore it apart. 12 men, as if by cruel irony, vanished in an instant, turning into debris along with their vessel. For 4 long hours, they evaded pursuit among coral reefs and countless islands until finally they managed to escape the deadly trap. Not a single torpedo was fired, no enemy ship was damaged, and they lost a boat and its valiant crew. That night, gathered at their base in Renova, Commander Mack called all survivors together. "Today we learned a very important lesson," he said quietly but firmly. "We cannot fight them head-on, like destroyers fight each other. We are not built for gun duels. We attack from ambush, or not at all." It was a brutal lesson, paid for in blood and lives, but it defined the strategy for every subsequent mission. Over the next 2 weeks of intense work, through trial and error, innovative tactics were developed. They learned how to use the radar shadows of islands to conceal their approach. It was discovered that shutting down 2 engines and running on only one significantly reduced their noise signature. A key achievement was mastering the coordination of attacks between multiple boats using simple light signals that remained undetected by the Japanese. The supporting intelligence network functioned flawlessly. Australian coast watchers, hidden on the hills of Japanese-occupied islands, relayed vital information about enemy vessel movements. Local Solomon Islanders, risking their lives, delivered information about Japanese troop positions by canoe. Sometimes, decrypted data from Pearl Harbor provided precise convoy schedules, but mostly they had to rely on instinct and accumulated hunting experience. In July 1943, PT boats still remained a classified weapon. In official US Navy reports, they were only referred to as small craft or mosquito boats. The Japanese were aware that their convoys were being attacked, but initial reports speculated that submarines or mines were responsible. The Japanese refused to believe that Americans could use wooden speedboats against steel warships. This ignorance became their primary vulnerability. On the night of July 18, vigilant coast watchers relayed vital information. A formidable Japanese convoy, transporting reinforcements, was preparing to traverse the treacherous Blackett Strait, heading to VA on Kolombangara Island. This was the very target American forces had eagerly awaited. Several transports, accompanied by only minimal escort, were forced to navigate narrow waters where their numerical superiority would be rendered useless. Lieutenant Mack volunteered to lead the daring attack on the fast torpedo boat, joined by PT-168 under the command of Lieutenant Henry Hank Bramwell and PT-171 under the command of Ensign Joseph Joey Antonelli. The evening briefing took place in an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Intelligence reported 3 large transports accompanied by 1 or 2 destroyers, carrying battle-hardened units of the 13th Japanese Regiment, elite troops with combat experience in China and the Philippines. These were not rear echelon units or construction battalions, but frontline soldiers ready to turn the lives of American Marines on New Georgia into a living nightmare. Squadron Commander William Bill Specht left no room for doubt, his words ringing out like an order. Gentlemen, this convoy absolutely must not reach VA. I don't care if you have to ram those transports. They must go down tonight. As the sun set on July 19th, painting the skies over the Solomon Islands in crimson hues, the crew completed their final preparations for sea. Paddy O'Brien, meticulously reviewing the torpedo checklist for the 5th time, set the Mark 13 parameters, a diving depth of 3 meters and a speed of 28 knots, optimal for striking an enemy transport packed with troops and equipment. Charlie Mendoza, like a seasoned watchmaker, perfected the engine's operation, installing mufflers to minimize the boat's noise. Dutch Vandenberg, like a chess master, calculated and rechecked the attack course, considering the slightest nuances, current direction, wind strength, and moon phase. The boat commander performed a final check of the machine guns, ensuring that ammunition belts fed without the slightest delay. Only armor-piercing incendiary AP rounds were included in the ammunition load. Ordinary bullets were useless against the thick armor of enemy ships, but API rounds could penetrate bridge portholes, causing fires and destroying enemy soldiers. Every 5th round was a tracer, leaving a fiery trail behind it, like a deadly fireworks display streaking across the night sky. At 8:30 p.m., the boat cast off and moved into the impenetrable darkness. The 3 boats proceeded in a strict column, engines running at minimal RPMs, emitting a muffled rumble. After clearing Renova Harbor, the commander gave the order to check weapons. The night momentarily erupted with a deafening roar of gunfire as 12 machine guns and 3 20mm cannons unleashed a barrage of fire into the deserted sea. Then silence reigned once more, broken only by the steady pulse of the engines and the hiss of water sliced by the boats' hulls. The ocean was rougher than expected, with a 2-foot swell that could hinder an accurate torpedo launch. However, this also meant that the boats' wakes would be harder to spot, and the noise of the waves would mask the sound of the engines. In a confrontation where 80 feet of plywood challenged 400 feet of steel, every detail mattered. By 11 o'clock that evening, the group reached its predetermined ambush position off the northern shores of Vella La Vella. Mac cautiously shifted the engines to idle, and the boat lay still in the night darkness, awaiting the signal. The silence was broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull and the distant rumble of artillery fire drifting from New Georgia. At 11:47 p.m., radioman Sparks Patterson received an important message from the shore observation post. 3 large vessels detected, accompanied by 2 escort ships, course 280 degrees, speed 18 knots, 15 miles from your position. The hunt had begun. Mac gave the order to start 2 engines at low RPMs to begin a stealthy interception. The calculations were simple, but the success of the entire operation depended on their precision. The enemy convoy was moving at a constant speed of 18 knots, holding strictly to its assigned course. The PT boat was capable of speeds up to 35 knots without leaving a noticeable wake. If they could achieve the correct position, the interception would occur in the narrowest part of Blackett Strait, leaving the enemy no room for maneuver. Soon after midnight, at 04:18 on July 20th, Dutch was the first to spot the target through his binoculars. Dark silhouettes of ships stood out clearly against the star-studded sky, positioned exactly where they were expected. The Japanese were moving in impeccable formation. 2 destroyers led the way, followed by 3 transports, with another destroyer bringing up the rear. The ships were not using navigation lights, but their impressive size and strict formation made them easy to detect if you knew where to look. Mac's plan was elegantly simple, yet incredibly risky. PT-168 was to attack from the port side, PT-171 from the starboard, and the narrator's boat would go straight down the center, aiming for the lead transport. This meant passing between the escorting destroyers, a sort of threading the needle between 2 deadly threats. But, if successful, it could create maximum confusion among the enemy and provide clear shots at all 3 transports. In the pitch darkness, Mac's voice was barely a whisper. "Slow ahead." Obeying the command, the boat crept forward at a snail's pace of 5 knots, aiming to close in on the enemy convoy undetected. From a distance of about 100 meters, the distinct rumble of powerful diesel engines could be heard, making the water tremble under the onslaught of thousands of tons of steel. As they drew closer to about 170 meters, individual details of the enemy armada became discernible. The pagoda-like silhouette of the lead destroyer's bridge, the cranes on the cargo ships, and even faint figures moving on the decks. When the target was just over 900 meters away, Mac gave the long-awaited order. 3 short clicks on the radio served as the signal for the 3 PT boats to attack simultaneously. The engines roared, instantly shifting from idle to full power, lifting the boat's bow out of the water like a wild stallion rearing up. The night silence was shattered by the roar of engines as the swift boats hurtled toward the enemy convoy, challenging the steel behemoths that seemed destined for destruction. The Japanese sailors were completely unprepared for such a daring assault. Their lookouts, trained to detect submarines and destroyers, never expected an attack at such speed and from such close range. The PT boats burst into the enemy formation before the Japanese could react, sweeping dangerously close to the escorting destroyers. Without losing a second, a barrage of fire from twin heavy machine guns rained down on the bridge of the nearest destroyer. Tracer rounds pierced glass and ricocheted off steel structures. "Shot 1, shot 2, Paddy commanded, releasing the first 2 Mark 13 torpedoes from a mere 550 meters. Missing from that distance seemed impossible. The deadly mechanical fish burst from their tubes and entered the water with a muffled splash, their propellers already spinning at full power, leaving a double trail of glowing phosphorescent bubbles. The target was a converted passenger liner carrying over 3,000 Japanese soldiers. The destroyer on the starboard side finally reacted to the attack, sweeping the boat with a powerful searchlight. The blinding white light instantly enveloped the target, making it impossible to see anything else. Suddenly, as if awakening from a slumber, the Japanese 25mm anti-aircraft guns unleashed a torrent of fire. Poisonous green tracer shells, like clawed hands, reached for the American boat, bringing death and destruction. Explosions ripped through the water around them, and spray from near misses drenched the crew on deck. But then the long-awaited moment arrived. The torpedoes reached their target. The first tore into the transport ship near the bridge, sending a pillar of fire into the night sky, illuminating everything brighter than lightning. The second torpedo, like a hammer of fate, struck the middle of the ship, instantly breaking it in 2. The enormous 8,000-ton behemoth, like a wounded bird, briefly reared out of the water, then broke apart and sank. Through the blinding searchlights and the roar of gunfire, the sailors witnessed a horrifying scene. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers, thrown by the explosion, thrashed in the water, their desperate death cries piercing even the roar of the boat's engines. Meanwhile, PT-168 delivered its blow. 2 Mark 13 torpedoes, like released arrows, struck the second transport. This ship, packed to the brim with ammunition and fuel, destined for the BA garrison, exploded with monstrous force, like a volcanic eruption. The blast wave was so powerful it knocked the narrator off his feet, and the scorching airstream seared the boat. A rain of flaming debris fell onto the deck, causing small fires that the crew desperately fought to save their vessel. The Japanese destroyers, recovering from the surprise, returned fire, but faced an insurmountable dilemma. Due to the extremely short range, their main caliber artillery could not target such a close objective, and the close proximity to their own transports made firing extremely risky. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide of battle, the Japanese ships attempted to ram, relying on their superior size to simply crush the American boats. The nearest destroyer, like an enraged bull, swiftly turned, aiming its sharp bow directly at the side of PT-172. It seemed that an inevitable collision would occur in a matter of seconds. At the critical moment, Mac, reacting with lightning speed, sharply turned the helm to the right and pushed the engines to maximum power. Like a dancer evading a deadly embrace, PT-172 executed a swift maneuver, avoiding collision with the destroyer by mere meters. As they passed, the commander unleashed a barrage of machine gun fire on the enemy ship's bridge, watching sparks fly from bullet impacts. The crew of PT-171, unfortunately, was not so lucky. Joey Antonelli, having skillfully selected the third transport as his target, was blinded by bright searchlights before he could launch his torpedoes. A barrage of 25mm shells ripped through the boat's bow like a needle through cloth. One of the shells struck a torpedo, miraculously failing to cause a detonation as the warhead had not yet been armed. Despite this, Joey was forced to break off the attack and retreat, leaving a trail of smoke and taking on water. The American boats attempted a second attack, but the element of surprise was lost. Japanese searchlights, like all-seeing eyes, pierced the water, and guns of all calibers fired indiscriminately. The water around the boats churned with countless shell explosions, creating the impression that they were under a torrential downpour. Most dangerously, the Japanese brought their 5-inch guns into action, capable of destroying a PT boat with a single hit. "Launch the remaining torpedoes and let's get out of here," Mac yelled, trying to be heard over the roar of the engines. In the roaring cacophony of the night, Patricia coolly launched her last 2 Mark 13 torpedoes toward the surviving enemy transport. However, the vigilant Japanese captain, noticing the deadly approach, skillfully maneuvered, leaving a deceptive wake. The torpedoes, deprived of their target, harmlessly passed along the sides without causing damage. Under the cover of darkness, the boat, using the full power of its 3 engines, sped away, cleverly dodging shell explosions. Meanwhile, behind them, the fierce battle continued to rage. PT-168, despite the damage it had sustained, managed to launch another torpedo, this time at the agonizing second transport. The colossal explosion, caused by the detonation of ammunition, lit up the strait with an ominous glow. Secondary explosions ripped through the ship's hull until it finally disappeared beneath the water. 2 of the 3 transports, taking with them the lives of nearly 6,000 Japanese soldiers, ceased to exist. The 3rd transport and the destroyers, though unscathed, were clearly shaken by what had happened. The Allied boats regrouped 5 miles south of the battle site. All 3 vessels were considerably battered but remained afloat. PT-171 sustained the most severe damage, with numerous holes near the waterline and 1 engine out of commission. Patricia's crew assisted in evacuating the wounded from the damaged boat, while ship's carpenters desperately tried to patch the holes using whatever was at hand, from mattresses to life jackets. During the fierce engagement, PT-168 lost its radio antenna and sustained numerous shrapnel damages to its hull, but remained operational. The narrator's boat miraculously escaped serious damage, suffering only a few shrapnel holes, an overheated gun barrel, and soot marks from close explosions. The crew survived and accomplished their mission. 2 enemy transports were confirmed sunk, thousands of Japanese soldiers perished, and plans for troop reinforcements were thwarted. The surviving transport, instead of continuing its journey to Vella La Vella, was forced to change course and return to Rabaul. The return to base proved extremely difficult. At dawn, Japanese aircraft took to the air in search of the American boats. The crew had to hide in the shadows of small islands, camouflaging the boat with palm branches and silencing their engines. Holding their breath, the sailors watched as enemy planes flew overhead. A journey that usually took 3 hours stretched into 14, but ultimately, all crew members safely returned to Renova. Upon the return, a detailed debriefing took place. Intelligence officers meticulously examined all aspects of the battle, Japanese tactics, the effectiveness of their weaponry, and the enemy's reaction speed. The information gathered was immediately disseminated among all PT boat units operating in the Pacific Theater. The lessons learned from this engagement subsequently saved many American sailors' lives and helped sink numerous enemy ships during the remaining years of the war. The effect of the new technology was quickly apparent. Japanese military, according to intercepted radio messages, were seriously concerned by the American secret weapon and high-speed torpedo boats seemingly appearing out of nowhere. For the first time in a long time, the Japanese Imperial Navy felt fear of the night. Unrestricted nighttime movement became impossible, and even the most protected convoys could not feel safe. Behind every shadow, a PT boat could be lurking, and any sound could herald the approach of American engines. As a result of this situation, the Japanese command revised its supply strategy. Convoys became larger, but their number decreased. The number of escort destroyers was doubled, then tripled. Seaplanes with searchlights began to be used for night reconnaissance. All these changes led to a reduction in supplies and reinforcements for island garrisons, giving American ground forces a significant advantage. The psychological impact of these events was perhaps even stronger than the tactical successes. Japanese soldiers, awaiting reinforcements that never arrived, began to lose faith in victory. Enemy commanders, unable to guarantee the delivery of necessary supplies, were forced to abandon offensive operations. The myth of Japanese invincibility at night, shattered by the daring attacks of American PT boats manned by young sailors and reservists, began to lose its power across the Pacific Theater. The impressive results achieved by the PT boat squadron provided a powerful impetus for the rapid expansion of this program. New advanced bases sprang up like mushrooms in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. The production of modernized boats, equipped with more powerful engines, radar systems, and reinforced armor, was urgently ramped up. Tactics developed through numerous experiments and encounters with the enemy were officially enshrined as doctrine and taught in training centers from Rhode Island to California. However, this success came at a high price, measured in the lives of comrades who were forever left on the battlefield. Just 2 weeks after the memorable attack, PT-166 tragically struck a mine while returning from patrol, taking the lives of its entire crew. PT-162 suffered an even more tragic fate. Due to engine failure, the boat lost power and was captured by Japanese destroyers during daylight hours. The enemy ships mercilessly shelled the helpless boat, reducing it to a pile of wreckage. Only 3 sailors managed to survive and were rescued from the water. Joey Antonelli, commander of PT-171, fell to a sniper's bullet while refueling his boat at an advanced base. By October 1943, when the author was transferred back to the United States to train crews for new boats, the squadron had suffered heavy losses, losing 7 boats and 73 crew members. Despite significant losses, American PT boats inflicted substantial damage on the Japanese fleet in the Pacific. Over 40 enemy vessels, ranging from destroyers to landing barges, were sunk or damaged, and thousands of Japanese soldiers perished without reaching their destinations. American PT boat losses were heavy but justified, as each lost boat could be replaced, unlike Japanese ships and experienced crews. In March 1944, now as executive officer on PT-321, the hero returned to the Philippines. The new boats featured improved radar, armored pilot houses, and more reliable torpedoes. But the essence remained the same: speed, surprise, and daring. American innovation once again proved its ability to overcome any enemy advantage. The Japanese were never fully able to adapt to the threat posed by PT boats. They tried using specialized hunter-killer groups, destroyers with radar, and even kamikaze boats. But they couldn't be everywhere at once, protect every convoy, and regain control of the night sea. PT boats became the secret weapon that shifted the balance of power in the Pacific. M. McPhersonson, who survived the war and was awarded the Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars, continued his service in the Navy and commanded a destroyer squadron in Korea. He maintained contact with the author until his death in 1987. At McPhersonson's funeral, his son shared his father's memories of serving on PT boats, where he learned true courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite the terror. The horrors of war left an indelible mark on the souls of those who passed through its crucible, but at the same time it became a harsh school of life, teaching lessons that proved useful in peacetime. Dutch Vandenberg, returning to quiet Yale after the fiery years in the Pacific, did not forget the navigational wisdom learned in the waters of the Solomon Islands. The experience gained in extreme conditions, having to maneuver between Japanese destroyers, became the foundation for his brilliant career as an oceanographer. He easily applied skills honed in a deadly game with the enemy to map ocean currents and explore underwater mountain ranges. He once confessed that after dizzying maneuvers at 40 knots in pitch darkness, with life on the line, everything else seemed trivial and simple. Charlie Mendoza, after demobilizing, returned to Los Angeles, where he plunged headfirst into the world of racing engines. The knowledge and skills gained from maintaining powerful PT boat engines helped him revolutionize automotive engine design, significantly increasing their power and speed. His garage quickly became a cult spot among hot rod enthusiasts, and the sign "Speed Shop" O'Shea's. "We made PT boats fly" spoke for itself. Charlie loved to tell his clients that if he could make 4,500 horsepower, push 50 tons of steel at 45 knots, he could certainly handle a car. Patty O'Brien decided to continue serving in the Navy, where he eventually became one of the leading experts in torpedo armament. His manual on Mark 13 torpedo maintenance, written based on his extensive combat experience, remained relevant until the 1970s. But he never forgot that fateful night battle off Vela Levella. "Those were my fish that sank those transports," he would proudly say. 2 shots, 2 hits, 6,000 Japanese who never got to kill Americans. The story of the PT boats, these daring and nimble mosquitoes of the fleet, is often lost in the shadow of grander naval battles of World War II, such as the Battle of Midway, the fierce fighting off Guadalcanal, or the massive Battle of Leyte Gulf. However, those who had the honor of serving aboard these tiny wooden ships understood their involvement in something truly innovative. They proved in practice that advanced technology, combined with unparalleled bravery, could shatter outdated dogmas and nullify differences in size. American sailors, many of whom had never seen the boundless expanse of the ocean before the tragic events at Pearl Harbor, were able to surpass a once invincible enemy fleet by playing by their own rules. The key to success lay not only in the PT boats themselves, though they were undoubtedly the pinnacle of engineering at the time, nor solely in the torpedoes, which, when functioning correctly, were formidable weapons. The true secret lay in the unyielding American spirit of innovation, in the insatiable desire to seek unconventional solutions when traditional methods proved ineffective. Although high-ranking naval officers initially regarded PT boats as amusing toys, young officers and enlisted sailors proved in action that these toys, equipped with powerful, toothy weaponry, could turn the tide of war. Every time modern naval warfare is discussed, missile boats, stealth technology, and asymmetric combat, one cannot help but see the direct legacy of those very PT boats that paved the way for new forms of naval confrontation. The contribution of PT boats to the outcome of World War II cannot be overstated. These nimble and maneuverable vessels proved that naval warfare was not just a duel of battleships from vast distances. They relied on speed, stealth, and surprise, striking in the most unexpected places and disappearing before the enemy could recover. Today's fast attack craft carry the genetic code of those very plywood boats that terrorize the Japanese fleet. It's no coincidence that in 1943 the expression "mosquito boat terror" appeared in the Japanese naval lexicon. This fear gripped their entire fleet. Post-war conversations with Japanese officers revealed that PT boats sowed panic disproportionate to their actual numbers. The Japanese had to contend with the possibility that American boats could be anywhere, develop plans to counter attacks that might not even materialize, and expend resources defending against phantom threats. Admiral Tanaka Raiso, who commanded many Tokyo Express operations, recalled after the war, "American PT boats were our worst nightmare. Submarines could be hunted with depth charges, planes could be seen from afar. But these devilish boats emerged from nowhere, stung like cobras, and vanished into the night. They made us fear our own element, the darkness, in which we once felt ourselves masters. In the history of the Pacific theater of operations, the fear and uncertainty sown in the minds of Japanese sailors proved more destructive than sunken ships. This psychological turning point marked the moment when the Imperial Japanese Navy, which had held undisputed sway in the region since Pearl Harbor, began to lose confidence in its own strength. When sailors hardened by night battles started to fear their own shadows, the outcome of the psychological war was predetermined. The evolution of torpedo boats during the war was astounding. Early models, including American ones, were essentially civilian vessels hastily converted for military use. By 1945, these boats were equipped with radar, rockets, modernized torpedoes, and even rudimentary guided missile systems. However, the core concept remained unchanged: small size, high speed, lethality, and crews composed of brave volunteers ready to take insane risks for their country. A striking example of the heroism of torpedo boat sailors occurred in October 1944 during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. A squadron of torpedo boats, significantly outmatched in firepower, bravely charged at the Japanese battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built. Although their torpedoes could not penetrate the giant battleship's armor, the audacious attack forced the Yamato to execute complex evasive maneuvers, buying precious time for American escort carriers to escape. That day, the small boats couldn't sink the behemoth, but their courage saved the lives of many American sailors. The torpedo boat bases, with exotic names like Renova, Tulagi, Mios, and Waendi, became steeped in legend. Behind these names lay places rife with mosquitoes, malaria, and relentless night operations. They were a stark contrast to well-established bases like Pearl Harbor or San Diego. These were harsh, grimy outposts where soldiers subsisted on canned food and cigarettes, where mail delivery was severely delayed, and entertainment was limited to poker and gossip. Nevertheless, morale remained high, as everyone understood their individual contribution to the larger cause. Special mention must be made of the Solomon Islanders. They selflessly aided the Americans, risking their own lives by guiding them through coral reefs, rescuing pilots and sailors, and providing invaluable intelligence on Japanese troop movements. Many were executed for their assistance to the Americans. Their bravery and sacrifice played a decisive role in the success of operations. Without their support, American forces would have been disoriented in the island's intricate maze. Coast watchers, volunteers, hidden on Japanese-occupied islands with radios and binoculars, became true guardian angels. They relayed vital messages such as 40 bombers heading away, or destroyer squadron moving south at high speed. Their timely warnings repeatedly saved bases from sudden attacks and allowed for advantageous ambush positions. Although personally unknown to most, everyone owed their lives to these heroes. Radar proved to be a genuine breakthrough, fundamentally altering the course of torpedo boat operations. Early models were, of course, far from perfect, struggling to distinguish an island from an enemy ship. However, by late 1944, technology had advanced significantly, enabling targets to be tracked even in pitch-black darkness and thick fog. Japanese forces, accustomed to relying on their superior night vision and years of training, suddenly found themselves at a severe disadvantage. American forces could now detect them much earlier, gaining an absolute advantage in night battles. Combat tactics continuously evolved. Sailors learned to deploy aluminum foil strips, chaff, to confuse Japanese radar, and developed wolf pack tactics, coordinating attacks from multiple boats simultaneously from different directions. Furthermore, they mastered using shore batteries as a diversion, forcing the enemy to reveal their positions by shelling false targets while the main forces maneuvered to deliver the real blow. The most dangerous missions were those that never made the news. Landing coast watchers behind enemy lines, evacuating stranded marines from encircled beaches, and delivering ammunition to cut-off outposts under heavy enemy fire. All of this was arduous and perilous work that saved countless lives. Torpedo boats became the fleet's Swiss army knife, used for any task deemed too dangerous or too audacious for conventional vessels. Aboard the swift conquerors of the seas, the relationships among torpedo boat crew members were a phenomenon unparalleled in the Navy. Unlike a destroyer, where a crew of 300 could remain an anonymous mass on a torpedo boat, with only a dozen sailors serving side by side, every crew member was intimately familiar with the others. They knew everything, from nightly snoring to agonizing nightmares, from susceptibility to seasickness to unwavering reliability in critical situations. This unbreakable closeness forged bonds of brotherhood that withstood the test of time and lasted a lifetime. Decades after the war ended, reunions of torpedo boat veterans resembled poignant family gatherings. This was no coincidence, for they were indeed a family forged in the crucible of war. The diet on torpedo boats deserved separate mention, perhaps even a lament. Sailors had to make do with dry rations, canned stew, powdered eggs, and anything they could barter from the crews of larger ships. Fresh water, whose value was immeasurable, was strictly rationed and intended solely for drinking. Hygiene procedures were carried out with seawater, leaving salt crystals on the skin that caused irritation and burning. The only salvation was coffee, strong as life itself, so rich that a wrench could reportedly stand upright on its surface. Driven by an insatiable desire for variety, some crews displayed remarkable ingenuity, catching fish with hand grenades or trading torpedo alcohol with naval base personnel for scarce provisions. Maintaining the combat readiness of torpedo boats in the tropical war environment was a true test for American sailors. The continuous exposure to the elements, pervasive heat, and extreme stress during high-speed operations demanded tireless attention to maintenance. In fact, more time was spent on repairs and preventive care than on actual combat operations. Every crew member, by circumstance, became proficient as a mechanic, carpenter, and electrician. An engine failure in enemy-controlled waters transformed the boat into a deadly trap, making maintenance a veritable religion. The climatic conditions of the Solomon Islands posed a threat no less formidable than the Japanese forces. Unexpected tropical squalls could instantly transform a calm sea into a raging ocean. Lightning strikes disabled radios and electrical systems. Exhausting heat and humidity led to sailors collapsing at their posts. At the same time, bad weather also served as an ally, concealing the small boats from enemy aircraft and making them harder to detect amidst high waves. Navigation in treacherous waters demanded skills beyond the academic knowledge acquired at Annapolis. Nautical charts were often inaccurate based on outdated 19th century surveys. treacherous coral reefs could suddenly emerge after a storm. Sailors learned to recognize the color of the water and the pattern of waves, to smell land long before it appeared on the horizon, and to navigate by instinct when instrumentation failed. Each successful patrol contributed to the creation of mental maps of these dangerous waters. Throughout the war, the Land of the Rising Sun actively worked to develop an effective counter to the threat posed by torpedo boats. Japanese engineers designed specialized shallow draft destroyers intended for hunting these maneuverable vessels. They also implemented sophisticated search systems, coordinating seaplanes and destroyers. There were even attempts to use captured torpedo boats as decoys to lure the enemy into traps. However, for every Japanese innovation, American sailors responded with their own countermeasures. This escalated into a tense standoff, resembling a deadly chess match played in the darkness of night at speeds exceeding 70 kilometers per hour. The psychological impact of this war on the sailors cannot be underestimated. Constant tension, the realization that every patrol could be their last, and the tragic deaths of comrades, all left a deep mark on their souls. Some could not bear the burden and requested transfers, even at the risk of being branded as cowards. Others, conversely, became addicted to adrenaline, volunteering for increasingly risky assignments. Most, however, persevered, finding their own ways to cope with the constant fear that never left them. In the harsh conditions of combat, a specific, albeit dark humor emerged, becoming an integral part of sailors' lives. Torpedo boats earned ominous nicknames such as Sudden Death, Hell's Angels, and Grim Reaper, reflecting the deadly nature of their missions. Crews adorned torpedoes with cartoon characters, with Donald Duck riding a deadly projectile being particularly popular. Soldiers composed songs about sunken Japanese ships, aiming for maximum gruesomeness in their lyrics. This served as a unique psychological defense, allowing them to endure the unbearable hardships of war. The effectiveness of torpedo boats was not confined to the Pacific. In preparation for the Normandy landings, these agile vessels were deployed to protect Allied fleets from German destroyers. The experience gained in battles in the Solomon Islands was successfully applied in the Mediterranean, the English Channel, and even on the rivers of Europe. The American doctrine of using torpedo boats significantly influenced naval strategy worldwide, stimulating the development of similar programs in dozens of countries. Decades later, reflecting on the past, veterans marvel at their survival. Young men, practically children, played with deadly weapons in a war that claimed millions of lives. They made mistakes that could have cost them their lives, took unjustified risks that still sent shivers down their spines. But despite all this, they accomplished something extraordinary, making a vital contribution to the war's outcome. An unproven idea was transformed into a formidable weapon capable of securing victory in military conflict. This stood as convincing proof that American innovation and courage could overcome any obstacle. The legacy of torpedo boats continues to live on in the modern Navy. In every fast attack craft, every special operations boat, in any vessel built for lightning-fast strikes and rapid retreats, the spirit of those first mosquito boats flows. Perhaps the sailors commanding these modern vessels do not know of the events off Vela Lavella, or of the terror they instilled in Japanese convoys, but they are undoubtedly the spiritual heirs of those brave sailors, continuing the traditions of speed, surprise, and audacity. When the question of pride in their service arises, they tell the story of the night of July 20th, 1943. That night, 3 small wooden boats attacked a large enemy convoy, sending thousands of Japanese soldiers to the bottom of the sea. Emerging from the darkness like shadows, as befitting their name, they vanished before the enemy could even comprehend what was happening and react. These boats became America's secret weapon that changed the course of the war in the Pacific. The Japanese command was astonished not only by the appearance of American torpedo boats, but also by what they represented: the audacious American drive for innovation, a willingness to take risks, and a disregard for established doctrines. For years, Japanese strategists had meticulously studied the US Navy, intimately familiar with its battleships and aircraft carriers, its traditions and tactical approaches. However, they could not have imagined that the Americans would dare to challenge their steel warships by sending wooden, high-speed torpedo boats into battle. This strategic short-sightedness proved costly for the Japanese fleet. The story of the torpedo boats became a truly unique chapter in American naval history. American engineers took a British concept, equipped it with powerful Packard engines, originally designed for aircraft, armed it with torpedoes developed for destroyers, and crewed it with civilians who, before the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, had never seen the ocean. This daring experiment seemed destined for failure, but it succeeded thanks to the unyielding will and ingenuity of American sailors. The last operational torpedo boat was decommissioned in 1959, giving way to newer, faster, and more powerful vessels. However, for the veterans who served on these boats during World War II, they will forever remain a symbol of victory in the Pacific campaign. American torpedo boat sailors proved that size is not the determining factor in victory, that courage is more important than armor, and that American sailors commanding wooden boats could overcome any adversary, anywhere at any time. Concluding his narrative in the quiet of his study, where faded photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings adorn the walls, the author still distinctly hears the formidable roar of the Packard engines tearing through the night. He feels the salty spray of the sea on his face, smells the sharp scent of cordite and diesel fuel etched into his memory. But most profoundly, he feels a sense of pride at having been part of something truly revolutionary, an event that forever changed the course of naval warfare. On these wooden boats, boys became men, fighting a war they did not start but were determined to finish. They struck from the darkness where their strength was most potent, where speed and surprise gave them an undeniable advantage. The Japanese learned to fear the darkness they once dominated, realizing that American ingenuity could turn any disadvantage into a triumph. This is the true legacy of the torpedo boats, not just in the ships sunk or battles won, but in the proof that free people, fighting for their freedom, can crush any tyranny, no matter how powerful it may seem. In those years, they were nimble, swift, and formidable fighting units. They were the secret weapon whose existence remained in the shadows until their emergence radically altered the balance of power in the theater of war. They were called the Mosquito Fleet, and it was these forces that were destined to crush an empire, sending enemy vessels to the bottom one torpedo at a time. The Japanese command was thrown into shock by the appearance of these secret American torpedo boats. for they embodied everything the Imperial Navy had not expected from the Americans: an unconventional approach to problem-solving, audacious combat tactics, and a fearless willingness to stake everything on an unproven concept. By the time the Japanese realized the full gravity of the threat they faced, it was already too late. The very shadows they once commanded now belonged to the Americans, and from these shadows, American boats delivered relentless blows until the symbol of the rising sun finally set over Japan's Pacific Empire.